Hello and welcome to Protecting Your aaS, M365 and more. Today's webinar is sponsored by Cohesity and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, and slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to a few resources from Cohesity. There's a case study, there's a Microsoft 365 solution brief, there's a backup as a service solution brief, and an offer to try backup as a service free for 30 days. Also in there, you'll find the link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club, which is Actual Tech Media's series of great printed resources on technology topics, and a link to our ATM Event Center, which has a calendar of upcoming events. So I encourage you to access all those resources now and share them with your friends and colleagues. At the end of this webinar, we will be awarding a $300 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for that prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize can be found also in your handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the terms and conditions link there. Finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenter. So to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50, and that's for the best question. So at the end of the event, we'll go back through all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. And with that, let's get to today's fantastic content. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter. We have John Hildebrand, who's Principal Technologist at Cohesity. John, welcome to the webcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So take it away. I'm really looking forward to this.
Sure. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you are in this particular neck of the woods. Since everybody's saying hello from in their particular location inside of the question and answer session, I'll say hello from Kansas City, smack dab in the middle of the continental United States. So I'm probably equidistant from just about everybody on this particular call. So without further ado, let's get into the webinar itself. Protecting your as a service. I can say it, but it'll come off as crass. But at the same time, it's a very important topic. And we're going to focus a lot on Microsoft 365 because that's one of the more prevalent software as a service solutions out there that many people are utilizing. So let's get into the agenda. First thing we're going to do is we're going to get into common as a service misconceptions. We're going to get into some of the Microsoft 365 native componentry and why third-party are necessary for retaining data. And then we'll get into some of the specific Cohesity components in protecting the Microsoft 365 workloads. All right. So identifying and understanding security challenges. Now, this was all the way back in 2020, and the numbers have likely changed in updates since then. But 70% of organizations have stated that they've had some sort of breach or incident involving the cloud in this particular, with SaaS products out there. 34% of them said they were due to malware attack. So that means that only a third of those were due to what we would probably consider a malicious attack of some sort. 29% of them were just from exposed data. This is, in some particular case, accidental exposure. So we're going to talk about not just necessarily ransomware and malware attacks that cause issues with the data in the cloud, but we also have to factor in that a lot of organizations have accidental leakage or accidental issues, whether it's deletion or just, well, many of us have worked in enterprises where files get deleted accidentally where they're important on a file server, as an example. Well, the same sort of thing happens in the cloud as well. 45% of them say they were due to ransomware or crypto jacking, so part of that malware percentage at that point. And 25% of them said were due to account compromises. This can be due to accidental deletion of, say, AWS S3 keys, or in some particular case, just weak passwords that were easily compromised. So, some common misconceptions of the data protection responsibility. We're going to focus on Microsoft 365 on this one. But as a SaaS customer, you're expected to cover these particular risks, whether that's user errors or insider threats, security issues such as ransomware, phishing, and viruses, or just general application usage. Those are the responsibility of the SaaS customer. Now, if we get into what the SaaS provider is responsible for, in most cases, it's the platform issues. It's to keep the solution available during that particular time so that your organization can continue to utilize that particular application. So they're more focused on infrastructure failures, application failures, and disasters, depending upon what sort of issues arise with the application. Now, when it comes to data protection, that's a shared responsibility between everybody. It's not just on one side or the other. Everybody needs to be able to utilize themselves and the provider at the same time to be able to comprehensively protect the data that you've got within the SaaS application itself. So understanding some common challenges. So ransomware encrypts a staff user's OneDrive data. That could be an easy one, or you can replace it with a lot of other type of file solutions that are out there, whether it's G Suite and Google Drive or Dropbox. These sorts of solutions are ripe for ransomware encryption based off of a accidental email opening that happens within that particular client's device at that point. Accidental or intentional deletion of data. Again, I already talked about accidental deletion. That happens quite frequently. So let's not just focus purely on the malicious. There's also the benign accidental sort of incidents that happen. And a team site recovery, document recovery required due to malware. So being able to do these sorts of components inside of Microsoft 365, there are certain coverages that are available, but there are limitations to those availability of those type of solutions that are out there. So let's get into some of those native solutions that Microsoft 365 has and why some of the third parties are necessary for retaining data. So let's talk about Exchange Online data retention options. We can get into limited flexibility. For instance, a deleted account or mailbox is only retained for 30 days. Outside of that 30-day window, it's gone. You can't get it back. Same thing for deleted item recovery. Even if you put it in the recycle bin, if you click the deletion option, there's only 30 days that Microsoft allows for being able to get that particular message back or that particular item back from the M365 Exchange Online solution. There's complex processes. If you want to do a litigation hold or a legal hold for compliance reasons on any particular mailbox or mail message, there's a very complex process you have to go through that involves a lot of screens and a lot of time back and forth with Microsoft on this particular hold that you want to place. And if you want to do retention policy for e-discovery, it's even worse from having to fill out these particular forms to make this happen. So as an example, you got to fill out a new case. You got to manage the case, fill in some more details. You got to create what sort of e-discovery componentry you want to have on your particular account. You got to choose your locations. You got to create an individual hold. You got to name your hold. You got to basically continue to select the correct hold that you put in the environment. You've got to search for the items that you want to be able to add to this particular hold. Then you've got to modify the different locations based off of it. And then you've got to select whether or not you want that in a single PST file or whether you want that spread across multiple different account information that exists out there in M365 Exchange Online. So we get into some of the OneDrive and SharePoint data retention options. They still have limited flexibility. Deleted files and folders are a 93-day window. So about a little over 3 months you can have for deleted files and folders. The site collection recycle bin only exists for 30 days. Once it's past the 30-day window for retention, it's flushed out of the system and you're no longer able to get information out of the recycle bin. Limited guarantees. OneDrive point-in-time backup and recovery services only exist for 30 days. So if you wanted to get something that was farther along from that 30-day window, you're basically out of luck. And version control. You've got all these different options to choose from when it comes to on OneDrive and SharePoint for what you have to select for the different versions that exist out there of that particular file. So a lot of complex processes and limited time windows for these particular solutions. Same thing, we'll go into Teams. It's built on interconnected services between 365 and Azure. So it's not just a single point of solution. You've got to have all these different solutions ingrained inside of that particular Teams site's information. Once again, limited flexibility. So very similar to SharePoint, 93 days for deleted files and folders. And then only a 30-day window for the recycle bin in and of itself. Limited guarantees on version control and sites and channels within Teams itself. So not if you're looking to hold a lot of data for a long-term period of time, Teams is limited in the overall amount of time, just like the rest of the M365 solution and portfolio. So when enterprises use third parties such as Cohesity, the impact of not protecting that particular data is you can start to add recoverability SLAs, RPO and RTOs based off of that data that exists out there. Long-term retention and data isolation for legal and compliance. You can access the data for exit planning. So if you're going to have somebody, an employee who no longer is going to be in the particular company, you can still have access to that particular data long after they're gone. An elimination of data silos to apply common policies across the board to make this happen. So we'll get into protecting Microsoft 365 workloads with Cohesity. Now, we get into preparing for your cloud journey. What does Cohesity bring to the table? Well, first and foremost, it's cloud native with a lot of global efficiencies. So when you write data to the Cohesity system, it basically is globally deduped, meaning if somebody else is also writing very similar data to it, you're going to squeeze a lot of information out of that particular backup set and save a lot of space based off of what's needed inside of that particular backup set. One platform, so whether it's on premises, and I use the word on premises correctly, just for those who are paying attention at home, the as a service solution that we offer, so Cohesity hosted, or if you're using a managed hosted from a service provider, all that experience is the same, utilizing Helios across the board for access to those environments. And you get to the point where you can manage less and innovate more. The whole idea is to eliminate these data silos that exist out there to give you time back in your day-to-day operations for just anything else that needs to crop up within the environment. So Microsoft 365 data protection. So the one platform, I mentioned that for long-term retention. So this is where we're getting outside of those 30-day, 90-day windows that we have that are built into the system. Now you can hold on to this data for as long as you want in the Cohesity system. Now, again, as mentioned, you can do customer managed in the public cloud. You can do on-premises, or you can do the backup as a service. And when we get into our demonstration later on, we'll be focusing mostly on the backup as a service capabilities within the Cohesity ecosystem. So what does that bring to the table? I mentioned global dedupe already, and then subscription-based pricing. So pay for what you use. Flexibility for backup of Microsoft 365 workloads. You can end up basically protecting all these different M365 components and providing that extra backup and retention and capabilities that are outside of those windows. Global search to restore. So if you need to search for something specific, like somebody's mailbox out of 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 users, you're able to zero in with global search capabilities to find these particular objects in question and not having to, essentially, the proverbial searching for a needle in a haystack. And fast backup for tens of thousands of users inside of the system. So the Cohesity benefits for M365 and cloud workloads. When we do get into more workloads than just M365. So just a mention of that, because I know it'll probably be a question later on as far as what all is capable of being backed up from a SaaS perspective. So the data security and visibility. So being able to provide data governance and ransomware detection on that particular data. So specifically in the M365 world, if you're looking at OneDrive, being able to identify if something's been encrypted and being able to go back to older versions to be able to get the malware off of the system. Protect data securely with flexible encryption. That's pretty much a no-brainer these days and age. You have to have some level of encryption across the board to make things happen. Gain visibility on cloud data from multiple sources. So being able to do this from multiple different locations across the board into this single pane of glass is what allows for a lot of the time savings that happens from just a day-to-day operations perspective. And being able to separate and isolate data for legal and compliance. As I showed you with the M365 click-throughs of what needs to happen to do a simple legal hold, this is a single click within a backup set for a particular user, and away you go. It's already held within the system and can be held for pretty much an infinite amount of time. So a simple and unified protection, getting into a single backup service for cloud workloads. Again, you're going into one location for this sort of thing instead of having to work within multiple different constraints for each individual SaaS provider that's out there. Backup cloud data to the cloud. Keep your data out there in the cloud and not necessarily have to depend upon bringing it back to on-premises if that's your preferred methodology for data holding in your particular organization. And extend and customize protection policies. This allows for you to flexibly change what's necessary, or if certain government or legal entities proclaim that you need to hold data for a certain amount of time, you can adjust these policies to be able to hold that data for the time periods necessary for your particular organization. And in the last category of enterprise-grade hybrid cloud backup, we get into the flexibility to protect or deploy on-premises. So again, you can use that, but if you're pretty much a cloud-native organization or born in the cloud, you're trying to keep your data away from localized copies in your on-premises locations versus having to utilize your cloud systems that you're paying for at that point. And flexible protection recovery options, and being able to meet SLAs with the unified policy management. So being able to have justifications and being able to have guarantees that you can give back to your end users, especially in the M365 world, that you're going to be able to recover things within a certain amount of time period and have certain copies of those particular data, the RPO, RTO numbers that combine into the SLA that you're trying to provide from a business perspective. So we will mention again, it was mentioned beforehand in the handouts. I do want to make sure that's pointed out that we do offer a free trial, and it is as simple as setup, connect, and protect to be able to start utilizing, especially M365 and other data sources that exist out there for a 30-day window. So I want to encourage you to go check out the terms and conditions, double check if the solution is going to be right for your test that you want to do during a 30-day window, and do something as simple as set up, connect, and protect to make this happen. So with that, we're going to get into a demonstration of some of the M365 components and what Cohesity can do to recover those particular solutions. So normally I would do this live, but in my particular case, my lab is going through some changes at this point. So I have to go with a video copy of the demonstration. And hopefully it'll work out well, as I'm going to voice over the video at the same time of the demonstration video. So as we're going through here, you can see the Cohesity user interface. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the context that we have for our particular solution. So you can see we've got managed by Cohesity and on-premises clusters that are available. But what we're going to do is we're going to select data protect from a backup as a service perspective. And you get this nice dashboard that shows you some of the different percentages that happen. So we're taking a look here at the solutions of the sources that are registered, and we've registered Microsoft 365. And you can see at the top of this, there's Mailbox, OneDrive, which we just selected, Site, and Teams. So what we're going to do is we're going to select a Mailbox in this particular case, Matt Murdock. We're big Marvel fans in our particular universe. So since he's a lawyer at the same time, it made sense to utilize him from this perspective. So we're showing that we've got multiple different backups within our window here for Matt Murdock. And what we're going to do is we're going to select, actually in this case, OneDrive, and we're going to select the ability to recover certain solutions to a new location. So I'm not necessarily going to recover this direct to Matt Murdock's box or his account. I'm going to recover this to another account. In this particular case, it's called restore demo. And then I need to select a folder, or at least give it a folder name that I want to utilize to restore this particular OneDrive data. So now I'm going to click on the recover capability. And now we started the recovery task. Now this will allow us then to take a look at an activity that pops up to show that we're in the middle of a recovery right now. So the process has already kicked off. So we're going to switch over to OneDrive, and we can already see in our demo restore account that we've already got that M Murdock restore folder available, and we're recovering the files within. So that's allowing us to show that we've got the restoration of his OneDrive account into our particular demo folder. So we've got the Matt Murdock folder, and we've got these different files that exist and images that exist for those particular files. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing. We're going to change the context to backup as a service. And in this particular case, what we're going to select is, I believe this one's going to be, we're going to do some more Microsoft 365. And we're going to recover a mailbox, in this particular case, of Danny Rand. And we're going to go to a new location. So if you have a different Microsoft 365 domain, you can actually recover to a different domain at the same time. So we're going to go to the restore demo location, and we're going to give it a folder name. So it had the folder name previous that we had for Matt Murdock, but in this case, we're going to put in Danny-restore, and we're going to start the recovery process of the mailbox of this particular user. So once again, we can head to the activities and take a look at the overall activity. So we're recovering a Exchange 365 folder. We're going to do a refresh of Outlook. And what should happen is now you can see we've highlighted the Danny restore folder, and we're starting to get that particular user's entire inbox available for us to take a look at from this view that we've restored to this particular account. So once again, we're going to select Data Protect as a service. There we go. And in this particular case, we're going to select a different Microsoft 365 solution, and we're going to do Teams. So in this particular case, what we're going to do is we're going to recover this safety team. But first and foremost, what we need to do is delete it from the system. And that's what we're doing right now. We're going to delete the safety team from Teams and show the information being brought back from deletion from the Cohesity system. So let's do a recovery. We've got some different options back to the original location and to restore the original members at the same time. So it's not just the data, but it's also some of the account configuration of that particular Teams area. So we're showing that there's an active task, and look at that. We're starting to see some of the Teams information populate back up again after it had been deleted. So there's some of the channels inside of the system. Now keep in mind they have a COH name on them, but you can always rename the channels after the fact, which I believe we do at some particular point in this demonstration. So as we wait for the rest of the channels to show back up, we can edit the channel, and there we go. We can change the channel name back to maintenance, and the name stays the same, and all the information is available for that Teams information to flood back into the system. All right. So now in this particular case, we've changed the context a little bit to a local on-premises cluster. And what we're going to do is utilize this on-premises cluster for SharePoint purposes. So we have a site in SharePoint that we have available. In this particular case, the communications site, and we're going to upload a file to it. And we're going to see that in the system. So it's been added to the communication site for SharePoint. But in this case, what we want to do is recover the communication site and not necessarily have that file that we had just uploaded to the system. So we're going to recover the site as it was before we uploaded that file. So we're going to recover the site right now. So it's in the process of running the task. So once again, the view is a little bit different since we switched to on-premises versus backup as a service. So we wanted to show some flexibility from system to system. And this allows for us to get some more broader information on the overall task for the recovery side of the equation. So you can see that we're recovering, and we get a nice list of what's happening in the system as far as the tasks that are being performed. And this is restoring back to our SharePoint site. So as we wait for this particular portion to finish, this allows for us to be able to, so we've been able to show OneDrive, Mail Exchange, Teams, and in this particular case, SharePoint. So we've been able to show off 4 of the different solutions inside of the M365 portfolio. Now, if you take a look at the documents, that document is no longer there. We no longer have it, and the files have been recovered back to what they originally were in case, as an example, ransomware had taken over those particular files. All right. With that, that is our simu-live demonstration of the Cohesity system performing the operations in question. So if there's anything I want you to take away from this, is to think a little bit differently when it comes to backup and recovery from an as-a-service requirements checklist. Do you want the ability to be able to see this from a single point of view, or single pane of glass, as it's commonly referred to? you need to be able to define out RPOs and RTOs and be able to adjust policies to be able to allow for that particular RPO and RTO configuration to happen. You need to have recoverability for the unexpected, whether it's malware, viruses, or in this particular case, accidental deletions and more. There's plenty of other different ways that you can lose or leak data in a cloud solution. We showed off that there's a better way to do Microsoft 365 data isolation for legal and compliance, just because the solution is very cumbersome from a Microsoft perspective. And you have to think of different ways to be able to access for that particular data for exit planning purposes. Not everybody's going to continue to work in their particular location over and over for multiple years. So you've got to be able to plan for being able to be flexible with that data and being able to continue to be able to use it in other fashions. So with that, I want you to think differently and think about Cohesity when it comes to protecting your as a service needs, and especially in your Microsoft 365 journey, should you be in the middle of, or if you already completed a journey from on-premises Exchange to Microsoft 365. And with that, I want to issue a thank you to everybody for sticking around and going through the demonstration and the overall webinar at this point. I'll turn it back over to Scott.
Okay, great. Yeah, John, we hear a lot about the limitations of Microsoft 365, retention and backup. And this has been, especially the first part of the presentation, that was one of the most detailed enumerations of those specific limitations that I've seen. And then there was also a great demo of how Cohesity is making it easier and more powerful to back up OneDrive, Exchange, Teams, and SharePoint. We do have a few questions here. The first one, what global regions are supported by Cohesity for backup?
So we're available in many different global regions. Obviously in the US, you'll see a lot of alignment with AWS regions. And so we've got plenty of US East, US West as availability zones. Canada has an availability zone that we utilize. Europe, I think Frankfurt is the zone that over there that definitely for sure that we're in, with other regions forthcoming. And the same for places like Southeast Asia and the APAC region have some zones available as well. And I'm probably missing a few, since we seem to be adding zones constantly overall, depending upon the needs of our customers and our ability to put the software out there in those locations.
Okay. All right, great. We have a question here from Bhavesh, who's wondering, would the Cohesity platform extend itself to play the role of a data archival and data retention solution too?
Yeah, exactly. It would be able to, because at the end of the day, what we can do inside of those policies is not just the initial backup and recovery within a certain window, but you can also archive that particular data, whether it's to another cloud location like S3 or Azure Blob Storage, as an example. And you can hold those for a extended period of time from an archival perspective. So you can have them not necessarily instantly available from the cluster's perspective or from the software's perspective, but you could put them on lower tier cost saving tier cloud solutions out there, and basically archive those for, in some cases, our customers are using those for years as the numbers of what they're putting out there for archival dates and retention policies.
Okay, super. So there's a trial in the resources there. And the question about that is, does that trial allow you to try other workloads in addition to Microsoft 365?
Yes. It allows you to basically utilize the whole system as is. So you can get into whether it's protecting AWS workloads, as an example. So EC2 and RDS, I think, are two workloads from the AWS system that we can perform backup and recovery capabilities to. There are some on-premises operations, such as VMware VMs and Microsoft SQL, as an example, for a local database. So there's plenty of other options as far as data sources that you can utilize from the backup as a service and during your trial.
Okay. All right. Super. And as far as those go, what are some of the most popular backup services, for Cohesity? among your products?
Yeah, thus far, so we're seeing, especially the backup as a service capabilities. M365 obviously
Yeah.
leads the way. There's quite a bit of folks who want to keep that data in the cloud and keep it managed by somebody else rather than having to put on-premises clusters and worry about things like potential egress charges and things like that. Because you know how the cloud providers love their egress charges. That's where they really love to get you as far as your bill is concerned. So being able to keep these in a solution that wraps that up and limits the overall exposure to those particular cost points is very popular within the organizations that are utilizing backup as a service. But what we can also do is that is coming along quite nicely is an on-premises version utilizing at, say, edge or robo utilization, where you may have a couple of VMs at a robo site, as an example. So instead of having to pull that data back directly to a data center somewhere and having to worry about connectivity, well, you can still perform backup and recovery options, but in this particular case, send them to backup as a service instead, as an example. So we're seeing quite a bit, depending upon the use case, the utilization of backup as a service, depending upon location of data, and in some particular cases, like where exactly the edge is starting to happen for organizations.
Gotcha. Another question. So here's a question they're asking. I would like to try Microsoft SQL. Can you back up Microsoft 365 groups data as well?
Now, I'd have to double check on the groups data. My Microsoft 365 foo is a little sketchy. So that is something that I can get back on that particular information. We're always adding new things into the mix. So it's one of those, it's like trying to keep up with a new cloud service and what its new version is capable of in that regard. So it would not surprise me if groups is available, but it would not surprise me if it's not available at this point, since I haven't worked with it directly myself. So, but I can easily get that answer. And as far as Microsoft SQL is concerned, on premises, we can. That is part of the on-premises package of being able to utilize with a connector that we utilize at an individual site. And just like a Microsoft, or I should say as a VMware VM, we utilize that local connector to be able to back up the data to the backup as a service componentry, utilizing that particular on-prem connector VM that we deploy out there for the edge services.
Okay. All right, great. Next question. Tatiana is wondering, what type of air gap does Cohesity utilize?
So from our perspective, I wouldn't consider this an air-gapped solution. Now, I may get in trouble for basically stating it as such, because at the end of the day, we're still connected to that particular subset of data. And while it's being protected out there, it doesn't have what we would consider kind of vaulting capabilities. We have another solution in our portfolio called Fort Knox that allows for more vaulting capabilities to kind of handle that in the 3-2-1 backup rule. The vaults, where you would normally send tapes to Iron Mountain as an example. So for that air gap solution. So we have a different solution in mind with Fort Knox that has much more stringent backup requirements and more stringent rules wrapped around who can access and what they can access, whether it's utilizing quorum, the multi-eye solution, kind of the multi-key solution. Multiple people have to turn the key to access the data type of idea. While backup as a service is more still probably in that 3 category, where you're creating a copy of that particular primary data set out there. So I would say from an archive and a long-term retention air gap type of solution, we have a different solution in mind for that. That's managed just the same, but requires a whole different subset of rules and restrictions around it.
Gotcha. Yeah, great context. Appreciate that. And Fort Knox, whoever came up with that product name, that's a good call. It really you really know exactly what you're getting there. So a question from Jeffrey is wondering about, in comparison to other, Microsoft 365 backup products, which of your features are the differentiators?
Well, again, it comes down to the snap tree information. So I realize I just threw out a product name built into the Cohesity system, but it's a solution that allows us to do essentially forever incremental backups overall, to keep a tree of snapshots for that particular data set over and over and over again, and to provide it for all intents and purposes from an infinite perspective. And that's where it allows us to also get that global dedupe capability, squeeze that data as much as possible to make it as small as possible on the system. So you're not having to keep fully hydrated copies of these particular data sets over and over and over in different locations to make backup and recovery possible. So I would say our built-in IP in Snaptree that allows for that incremental backup and forever incremental backup, and the Snaptree portion for the boy, I just forgot what I was going to say there, but the global dedupe. That's what it was.
Yeah, global dedupe. Okay. All right, super. Marcus has a question about, I think that you showed in Teams, in the demo, you were showing how, not only does the data come back, but the individual users who were in that channel or whatever it was in Teams were included as well. And he's wondering, like, do you, store the contacts for SharePoint or Calendar, Teams data, Azure Sync settings? Can you talk a little bit about what comes with Microsoft 365 emails, like what's included with the backup?
Yeah, so we can get down to granular recovery inside of Microsoft Exchange 365. So there's the ability to recover individual messages that has been enabled. So there are the ability to do global search based off of keywords to make that happen. Although that can also lead to a little bit of Pandora's box of somebody, the backup administrator, being able to read emails at that point. So you have to be very diligent over who has access to be able to recover those particular components. And depending upon the different solution, as we went through in the demonstration, there are some solutions like Teams. There's other metadata like the user information and things like that happen. So it's on a per solution inside of the M365 portfolio as far as what we're actually backing up and what we're actually recovering. Now, there's certain things that may or may not work right now, basically either due to API limitations or because they're in development from a Microsoft perspective for new features that we wouldn't have direct access to until after it's been released, as an example. So we're trying to keep up with as much of the ecosystem as possible and trying to keep all the solution as fresh as possible so that we're backing up the very pertinent information for recovering these particular solutions. But in some particular cases, we may be a version or two behind in some of those, just trying to play catch up like the rest of us are trying to.
Of course. Okay. All right. Sounds good. Well, John, it looks like we've gotten through most of the questions here, but I did just want to ask, sort of in closing, once again, if somebody wants to get started with Cohesity or find out more, what do you recommend that they do to take action?
Well, I can't stress enough the free trial as an example. So inside of your handouts, there's the link to the free trial page to be able to give the solution essentially a 30-day trial run and see if there's a use case that works for your particular organization. Now, we realize that particular solution may not work for every workload, but it's the start of taking a look at what Cohesity can do for your organization. So I would do as much as possible with a 30-day window and try to experiment with the free trial as much as possible. Outside of that, obviously visiting the website, www.cohesity.com. And we got a few more handouts as far as customer stories and things of that nature that allow for you to see if you fall into the same particular category as some of the customer references that we've got for the different solutions that we offer. So take a look at all that particular information, share it amongst your colleagues, and start a dialogue to see whether or not this is going to work out best for you.
Okay. Well, John, thanks again. Great presentation. Really appreciate you bringing us up to speed on Cohesity and all the stuff that you guys are doing.
All right. Thanks a lot for the opportunity, Scott.
Okay, before we wrap up, we do have one more piece of business. It's the $300 Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of that gift card today is Alex Leung from California. So congratulations to Alex. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Cohesity for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. That concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day.